Well, as you heard earlier, Foreign Minister Marise Payne has condemned the strip searching of Australian women at a Qatari airport as grossly inappropriate and offensive. But she stopped short of labelling the search as sexual assault until she has received a report on the incident from Qatari authorities. Joining me live is Nationals MP Barnaby Joyce for this and a few other matters. Thanks for your time. What did you make of this? And the Minister also saying he believes it's a safe transit hub still for Australians?
Well, obviously, it's absolutely outrageous. And what would happen with the women who had to undergo that, to be taken off a plane and be searched by two other women, obviously imagine how that would twist your mind inside out, to believe you're in a safe place and be taken to something that's a complete and utter intrusion and affront and quite terrifying, I would suggest, in some instances. What authority and on what purpose was this search undertaken? Why? What possessed them? And if there was a tragedy or someone had been in a position where this miscarriage, this human life is in a toilet, then how do you think that's going to help them? Searching everybody on a plane. This person needs real help, not further traumatising.
Yeah, a pretty troubling and baffling incident. We'll see perhaps what more detail emerges. Let's turn our thoughts to Victoria. Donut Day is what they're calling it. No cases, thankfully. You'd assume Daniel Andrews will be announcing restrictions being eased this afternoon.
I've just given up on Mr Andrews. It is absurd. Just think of it on the weekend. We had the Melbourne Storm, which probably can't go back to Melbourne. We have Richmond, which probably can't go back to Richmond. We've got the Melbourne Cup, which nobody's going to. We've got Lygon Street about to become an archaeological dig. We've got people going broke. I think, was it 1,200 a day, or maybe it's 1,200 a week? People out of work. We've got $85 billion they've received in federal government support. This is an absurdity. I don't know what Mr Andrews is trying to do. End up with zero risk. Well, if you believe in zero risk, you better close down the roads, close down the airports, close all swimming pools, get rid of all ladders from houses. You can't drive for zero risk. You have to drive for minimal risk and then leave it up to people to do the right thing, which they are doing overwhelmingly. But, Mr Andrews, you are driving your state's economy into the dirt. It's actually in the dirt. Now it's a matter of you just carting around, dragging around just like a dead cat. What is the purpose of this? There are families going broke, and I don't know what it is. There's a cog missing there somewhere.
So we'll wait for the announcement, but obviously the federal government part, as you mentioned, there are a lot of money given out. JobKeeper, obviously. It has begun to be phased back, though, and so is JobSeeker. That's before restrictions have eased. Is that an inherent issue? I mean, I know the Victorian government has its role to play, but the Victorian people didn't wish any of this. Was withdrawing some of that stimulus the wrong move?
Well, unfortunately, you get to a position if you're heading towards $1.7 trillion of debt. Remember, this is borrowed money. It's from the people of China and the people in Japan and the people of the Middle East and dealers in London, I suppose, and throughout Europe. They're not giving us this money. They're not saying, here, have this money. Don't worry, you're jolly good people and we never want it back. They're saying, we will lend you this money. And at some point in time, you have to show the capability, even if you're rolling it, the capability to pay it back. Now, you could go on subsidising the JobKeeper and JobSeeker forever if you had the money in the bank, but we don't. We're borrowing it. We're putting this bill on our credit card. And that, of course, means that we've got to just be a little bit prudent and a little bit sober. And what we have got now, and I've been talking to a range of people, especially in the hospitality industry, where they're saying we're looking for people to do work and we can't find them now. So, I think you've got to make the situation meet the reality. And in areas where they are starting to get the economy going, they're actually looking for workers, and in some instances they can't find them. Obviously, agricultural areas is another place, hospitality, agriculture. We've got to start understanding, and people will always say, well, that's not the job I want. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. You've got to take the job you can get. And as I said before, I was a former Deputy Prime Minister, and when I'm at home, I do manual work, and it's just the way it is. And the people I work with, they get a bit upset because they say, well, I've got a job, I'm working, I'm paying my taxes, and I know other people in town who just don't want to do the job. Maybe it's apparently below them, but it's acceptable for us.
I just wanted to ask you finally as well about this push for a federal ICAC. There's obviously been the case of Gladys Berejiklian, but also the various issues raised by the Australian Audit Office. Let's be frank about this. This has not been a priority for the government, given how long this has taken, has it?
Well, I think the issue is you've got to make sure a decision that is highly political, a decision that is highly parochial, is not necessarily a decision that's corrupt. And they're the things we've got to separate. You elect politicians to govern, and you judge them at the next election, as they're about to do in Queensland, as to how they have gone. Now, if we have a position where every decision where you differentiate from the bureaucracy could be deemed to be corrupt, then you're going to have ministers who are basically just paper tigers. They just sit there and do what they're told, and our whole democratic system will have inevitably changed, and we don't want that. If I would look at some of these processes and say it's the capacity of the minister to act as a minister as designed in the Westminster system still completely apparent. Now, if you're looking for corruption and if you're looking for malfeasance, well, the process of the last week, which hasn't been good for us, to be honest, has shown it's been very good at finding out issues about Western Sydney Airport, about some lady who likes to buy her friends at work Cartier watches, about a bloke at ATSIC who decides he's going to hit us up with $118,000 accountant's fees. And why did I get out of that job? He should have been a client. These are we're finding these things out. So in actually tracking things down, you'd have to say, well, the current system is not completely and utterly inadequate in being able to do that.
Right.
But,
yet, and yet, sorry, just to jump in, we're nearly out of time, and yet the Audit Office wanted $6.5 million more just to be able to keep up the job it is doing. It's going to do fewer performance audits because the government wouldn't grant that money. In a budget where money was thrown out everywhere, how can the government justify that?
Well, in many instances, we're talking in that what the audit officers come forward with is what they call non-cash expenses, such as depreciation. So when you actually dig down through it, you can say, well, the result that you've shown is not as apparent on a cash basis as what you've deemed it to be.
But just on, let's just look on audits though. They're meant to do 48 performance audits initially. That's already gone down. It will go 42, 40, 38 over the next 3 years. There will be fewer audits because of the funding.
Well, the one thing I can always assure you, Tom, is I've never seen a budget yet or an appraisal yet of 2 and 3 years out that's ever come to fruition. They always change. So let's have this conversation next year and we can talk about years 2 and 3 when they're years 1 and 2. All
right, well, if there's more funding, we'll see. We might talk about it then. Barnaby Joyce, appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Absolute pleasure, Tom.